So I'm here in particular, specifically to talk about my opiate addiction, and I say opiate addiction because, well, some work better for me than others. When I say work, keep me comfortable, but at the end of the day, any of them would work for me. I just have to find the right dosage, from oxycodone, diethylmorphine, heroin, morphine, opium, which I've never tried, but I'm sure it will do the trick. So I guess opiate and opioid addiction speaks to me personally, mainly, first of all, because I am an opiate addict, but just in the way it affects one's mental health, being, and idea of who they are. So I guess I'll start at the beginning. About 10 years ago, I had just started getting into drugs. Was drinking, not excessively, but I enjoyed the feeling. I enjoyed the way I had a lot of friends, the way it made me feel like I was bonding more with them. I was taking ecstasy. I couldn't believe there was a drug called ecstasy, but I liked the feeling it gave me, and acid. And hallucinogens were something that I believe triggered my addiction. I'm sure I might have found opiate addiction after that regardless, but LSD sort of, in my words, gave me information that I hadn't earned. I was 19, and I took LSD, and suddenly I was flushed with a massive amount of information and knowledge about the way the world worked, and it ripped my ego away. I was already a very shy child, but I had my friends, and I'd learnt ways to cope. I didn't really understand the way the world worked, but after I took LSD, I was flushed with all this information, and I thought it was an epiphany, so I played around with that for a while. What I came to realize was that it ripped me away from myself. I didn't learn who I was in a conventional way. I was showing it through psychedelic eyes, if that makes sense. So, after that, I began my quest on drugs. I was really interested in them. I was, a very creative person, very introverted but extroverted at the same time. And I started looking online for OTC highs, which was over-the-counter highs. And I found codeine, and this was 10 years ago. And in Australia, 10 years ago, there were no restrictions on codeine. They came over the counter. You didn't even have to leave your name. So there was no restrictions or control over them. So there was a drug called Nurofen Plus, and it was ibuprofen 200 milligrams with 13.8, I believe, milligrams of codeine. So there were ways to, get rid of the ibuprofen cold water extraction, but back then I believed that if I cut the pills in half, I would be cutting out the ibuprofen. But eventually, the half that I cut, that I believed the ibuprofen, I would take them after, in a sense of desperation, wanting to get high again, and I got high off the half that I thought was ibuprofen. So they were obviously mixed, and ibuprofen damages your gut and damages a lot inside you, much more than codeine does. So I started to do that, and I guess the feelings I can describe from my early opiate use, which I struggle to ever feel again. You really are chasing that first high. And then it becomes about management, which is pretty much the end of the line for most opiate addicts. So I just felt heavenly, and this was from 60 milligrams to 70 milligrams to maybe 120. Those first doses, I would sit out in the sun on a summer morning in my share house with my best friends, and I would feel just like I was melting into the hammock or the chair, the sun chair. I felt the way I thought I deserved to feel. Pardon me. I felt like the person I always knew I could be, and I know that is very superficial, but I ran with it. I ran with this feeling, and I chased it so much I started to abuse it. And when I say abuse, I mean I didn't care about the ibuprofen intake. I was using mainly codeine. Well, codeine, I'd sometimes get a hand on oxycodone, which I didn't know how to use. I didn't know the conversion rates. And codeine, my tolerance was getting higher, 300 milligrams to 500. which is roughly, 10 divided by 10 the potency of morphine, so 10 milligrams. So I wasn't injecting or anything, but I felt amazing. I felt like I could talk to people. I felt amped up. Sometimes it makes people feel slow and out of it, but it made me feel like motivated, and the smallest tasks became something I could do. I fell in love with my own mind. I fell in love with my knowledge, philosophy. I fell in love with all this information that acid had made, and now that acid had lifted a hole in my ego, opiates filled that hole, and they filled it well for a while. I did that for a long time. After 2 years of that codeine, I came out to my mother. She probably already knew something was up, because I started to ask her if she could buy me Nurofen Plus. Same with my friends. I came out that I was addicted to this drug. I went to detox, and after 5 days I thought I was cured. And little did I know that that's not how it works. So I kept pushing it. I had problems with my stomach lining, and I got a ulcer from the ibuprofen, and that was about 6 years ago. After that, I vowed that I would try and take better care of myself, even though I wasn't in some ways. After I came out of hospital, everyone thought that was it, that this was big enough to stop me, but I kept using. I remember my dad finding the pills, Panadine for paracetamol and codeine after that, and he just couldn't believe that I would do this to myself. And I was at the point where it didn't matter to me. I mean, on paper it sounds horrible, but in my own mind I would do whatever I could to pursue this stability of the morphine in my system. Codeine, which transfers to morphine through the liver. So I did that for a while, and then I went to rehab a few times. After I left rehab, I was 9 months clean, and I started ticking away online about how I could get high without it coming up on a drug test. And I found a drug called loperamide, which had mixed reviews. Some people said it was a placebo, others said it worked, and guess what? It worked for me very well. I ended up taking 80 milligrams of gastrostop, 80 to 120 for a long time, and then I started using heroin. I started using oxycodone when I could. I became a hardcore heroin addict. I switched back and forth from loperamide to that when I couldn't get it. And, that feeling never returned. That feeling of bliss, that feeling of nodding out. I nodded out way more on codeine at the beginning than I ever did on heroin. Heroin felt like a very forced nod, like I'd passed the magic and I was just taking enough to nod. Like the magic was gone, and I'm on methadone right now. I get stability out of it, and a lot of people don't realize that it's just about maintaining. It's not even about withdrawal, because the physical withdrawal for me never really reaches that bad epitome of bad, but it's psychological. I'm so psychologically addicted to morphine and all its counterparts, its derivatives, and I'm always trying to maintain that high, that amount in my system. Recently I've become very interested in what it's doing to my mind, because I always thought I was a poly addict and never really honed down on the fact that I was needing morphine every day. I love meth, I love alcohol at certain points, I love acid and ecstasy, but I always needed morphine every single day for my own well-being. And I started to get into literature about it, and I agreed with a lot of what people were saying, the fact that it's a dream state, and the way the mind works on it, and the way it's a very introspective drug, and it's changed my personality and the way I see myself quite definitively. And I try and work out what it's doing to my mind. With methamphetamine, it's a massive amount of dopamine, and I try to understand how I was craving methamphetamine, and I worked that out. It didn't really help me much with my sobriety from meth, but I became interested in the neuroscience of it. So with morphine, it's endorphins, which is endogenous morphine, and I started to think that I have a massive deficiency of that after so much use, and I saw withdrawal as a part I couldn't get through. I always thought it was the physical that would drive me back. The physical withdrawals get harder and harder. If I were to abstain from it for a week and I took one dose of any opiate, I'd go back to the start. My body and my mind were infatuated with this drug, with this substance, and I still believe that some part of me believes that I need this to function. I need this for the rest of my life, and that's ridiculous. I know that's not true, but that's just the way it goes. You know, I will do things to get it that I wouldn't normally do. I would steal. You know, if I was in that sort of place of withdrawal, I'm getting sick of myself doing that, so I am pulling back from that. That's why I'm on a stable dose of methadone. But I never get that bliss that I got from the first time. Now it's completely about maintenance, and it's like someone described it on Reddit. Morphine and its derivatives are like an armor. You don't do anything while you're on it. You're stationary, and it makes you glide through life. You know, like enveloped in art and music and all that. But you're not really doing anything. It makes you just like a lot of drugs do. And then when you get off it, it feels like a blanket's been ripped away from you. I don't really, I get the flu symptoms, sort of yawning and sneezing, but more than ever I get this feeling of exposure, like I'm being exposed, like the sun, and I swear, I just feel like I'm dirty. I feel like I'm just disgusting, and my mind is so racing. I'm so obsessed with this withdrawal, how far I'm going through it. It's almost torture, much more than it is physically. And it's something that every time I try and I fail, it's like I can't get through it. So this time I've gotten on an opiate, whatever it is, opiate maintenance therapy, and I don't believe that's making me clean. It's a narcotic. I'm still taking it. Like there's no sobriety there. I'm still taking an opiate, but my aim is to get myself to a place where I'm strong enough to beat this, and I need this for a little while to get to that place, because I can't just stop, because my life, I've done a lot of different things, but I've ended up in a place where I don't really have much of a life, you know. So when I stop, I don't really do anything. I need to build up a life so that can help me when I get clean. And yeah, that's sort of my story on opiate addiction. Thanks.